that I don't think for a moment that this administration even intends, forget that whether they can or not, they can't, but they don't even intend to, nor do they even want to truly deport all of the unwanted or undesirable voices. I mean, there's no resources are possible for them to do that. What they're looking to do is to instigate enough fear by picking certain anecdotal, cases that create such a ripple effect that for the rest of the population, they self-censor. Deport a few students, shut down a few protests, criminalize a few voices, right? Whether it's students or whether it's migrants, and then cause the rest of the population to go, oh, maybe I'm next, let me shut it down. And it becomes self-censorship. That's the real name of the game. It's to instigate fear, it's fear-mongering. And so, to me, as a community, the last thing that we should do is to fall into the trap and start to self-censor out of fear, therefore losing not only the battle but the war, and allowing the voices of pro-genocide support to be the only voices. Now, how do we do that without getting ourselves in legal trouble? We'll be talking about that, but I'll just say to that point, even without their threat, if we are principled and objective, if we're data-driven and not emotional venting, if we are per our own religion, وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, you have two friends, two allies. One is truth, and truth is not just fact, it's also data, it's also research, right? It's not just what you feel or what you want to say. It's careful, measured language. And sabr is not just patience, it's persistence. In Islam, sabr is not a passive thing, it's an active thing. It's not just waiting, it's being persistent even when there is trial and tribulation. We have those two things, then we continue to speak the truth without self-censoring, without fear.
No matter what legal situation you're in, whether you're at a protest, whether a law enforcement door knocks at your house, or whether you're being targeted by your administration, it's very important to document everything. If you're at a protest or home, document encounters with the police, whether it's recording on your phone, saving all the papers they leave, and when you're documenting, these are the questions that you want to answer. Who was involved? What happened? Where did it happen? When did it happen? Who did you report it to if you did? And were there any witnesses? The Fourth Amendment protects you against unreasonable search and seizures of yourself and your property. A seizure just means the government taking your property. So for the government to seize your property, they have to have probable cause or reasonable suspicion. They can't just take what they want because they have a badge, right? And these searches require a warrant. So police may pat you down if they think their safety is at risk. So anytime you are interacting with police, you need to make sure you're asserting and protecting your rights. For example, if they stop you while you're walking, you should ask if you're free to leave because they cannot just detain you without probable cause. And while you're walking or something and police stop you and they ask you to show your ID, you do not have to show the police your ID. But if there are non-citizens here, you also don't have to show your ID to police. However, you do need to show your ID to immigration enforcement, like ICE. One thing that's important about the Fourth Amendment is that if you're stopped for speeding or some other traffic violation, it's important that, if the cops say, oh, I want to search your vehicle, you have every right to not allow them to stop. If they're stopping you for speeding, you should definitely assert your rights countless times. I do not consent to a search. I do not consent to a search. I do not consent to a search. And I want to get something straight. Of course we know police, your rights are one thing and the law is one thing, but how police feel is another thing. We all know they will do what they want to do and how they feel at the time. So asserting your rights they may not listen, they may not care, quite frankly. So it's important though to assert these rights so that you can say, it's used in court for when you want to say, I did not consent to the search, and then it could help you a lot in court. And so that's why it's important to assert your rights. Now, turning to if an agent knocks on your door, hopefully this never happens, but if it happens, it's important to never, ever, ever speak to the agent, if they're part of the FBI, if they're part of the police, whatever. It's important to keep your door closed and don't talk to them. And if they come and they're knocking, you get their card, you say, okay, you get their card, get their number, what agency they're from, but don't ever speak to them. And because everything you say can and will be used against you. And so you really just want you can just say, okay, leave your card at the door, and you don't want to give any semblance of you're inviting them in. And so leave their card at the door, and then you give the card, you immediately contact the lawyer, and then your lawyer will handle that interaction from then on.
Yes, that we are in a very uncertain and complex time where every quarter of our ummah is suffering, where we are being criminalized, whether it be students, employees, or immigrants. But also something to remember, and I know the elders here know this, is that we have been here before, right? In the post 9/11 era, we have been here before. And although we might have been caught off guard last time, we as a community are not caught off guard this time. And even us sitting here today is a testament to that. This time we are stronger, more educated, more united, and more importantly, this time there's an entire defense infrastructure. Every person on this panel represents an organization that makes up an entity that is ready to make sure you are not defenseless, that if anybody comes for each and every single one of you, there's an entire defense or infrastructure behind you. Tom Homan, he's Trump's right-hand man when it comes to ICE. He said that Chicago specifically, and he quotes, is very difficult to arrest these criminals because they are a very educated bunch. So you being here today, knowing your rights, this is how we start and we beat the system. So with that, I'm going to be starting with talking a little bit about Trump's executive orders that aims to punish protests for Israel's genocide of Gaza. So, does anybody here know how many executive orders Trump has passed against students specifically and protests? Anybody?
Shout it out.
Numbers?
Yes.
Go.
How many? 151. So Trump has passed 151 executive orders since 2025. On January 29th specifically, and this is kind of the one that started it all and the repercussions that we're seeing right now, Donald Trump signed an executive order targeting university students who participate in protests and speech critical of Israeli genocide. It will work alongside long-standing efforts to strong-arm universities into policing and punishing Palestinian activists. And it directs basically government agencies to report any possible civil or criminal actions that can curb anti-Semitism, right? That's the buzzword that you're gonna hear. So this actually expands Trump's 2019 executive order, where the IHR definition of anti-Semitism to be critical of Israel. So that's why anytime you hear somebody that's standing up against genocide being critical of Israel, is because in 2019, Trump signed an executive order to expand the definition of anti-Semitism to include criticisms of Israel, and he's building off of it with this executive order. All of these executive orders, everything that we're seeing today, is a retaliation to the growing power of the people over the past 2 years. It is no coincidence that Mahmoud Khalil was arrested a week before the genocide resumed. He was meant to be an example. It is to say that the students have been so successful over the past 2 years that Trump has literally changed the entire legal order to criminalize these students. Literally changed the entire legal order. And the greater the threat to their administration, to empire, the greater the violence that is deployed against them. So all these executive orders, all these arrests and deportation is only a retaliation of the power of the people. The First Amendment does not apply to private universities. Students come to us a lot that say, I have a First Amendment right to protest. For example, if you go to, let's say, DePaul or these private universities, you actually don't have a First Amendment right, but most of these schools actually receive federal funding. So when they receive federal funding, they have a duty to abide by something we call Title VI, right? And that says that they cannot discriminate against any student, regardless of background, race, gender, ethnicity, and the workspace. For us at MLFA, we actually sued Harvard, and we represented a couple students, Muslim Arab students at Harvard, that were discriminated against by the university, and we received a settlement that basically Harvard was forced to change their policies to be more inclusive of Palestinian and Muslim and Arab students. But then, just last week, Trump passed an executive order, once we reached the settlement, that held $2.2 billion in federal funding from Harvard because of their anti-Semitic stance. So, Harvard is now suing Trump, and we are doing an amicus with Harvard to say that if Harvard adheres to this executive order, they are going to be backfiring on the policies that they agreed with us. I know it's a little confusing, but what we're literally seeing right now is lawfare, right? It's this battle in the courts that the Zionist entity has failed to silence the students and the people in the streets, so instead they take it to the courts. It's literally a back and forth battle in the courts of we strike there, they strike back. Now we're almost not exactly on Harvard's side, but we're making sure Harvard stays true to what they said with our settlements. Do not let the fear control you, but let the risks inform you. I'm going to say that again. Do not let the fear silence you, but the risks to inform you. Is your speech protected? One of the things that me and Rifka tell clients all the time, imagine a tweet that you said, or something that you said in a speech was brought in front of you in court, right? It was read in court. Would you feel okay with that? If the answer is yes, then you're good. You know, if you're saying, this many people died in Gaza, right? This is what's happening in Gaza. You said it in court? Yeah, these are facts. But I think you know when you say certain speech and if it was read in court and you're in trouble, keep that as like a kind of standard of measurements of how are you not inciting violence or rioting, we call it. The government has a right to make sure your phone is an actual phone, right? That it's not like a bomb or anything like that. They have a right to make sure it's an actual phone. Which is why if they go check it, take it, that's fine. You kind of don't have a right when it comes to that. But you do not have to give your passport. Take note if your phone is ever out of your sight, even at security inspection. So when you put your phone through security, if it's not where you left it, take note of that, because they can be, that may mean the government is running additional tests on it. Your face is not a password. Your face is not a password. So disable Face ID and use a strong alphanumerical code. So again, you do not have to give your password, but your Face ID is not considered a password. So they can put your face and unlock your phone. You have the choice of whether to provide the password to unlock or your phone again, but we recommend that you do not. If you do not, TSA may detain your phone or keep it for up to 2 weeks, just so keep that in mind. And if you choose to provide your password, consider the following: uploading all images to iCloud, disabling face recognition, logging out of all apps, taking a screenshot of your call log right before going through security. So this is all kind of difficult to do, so this is why we recommend taking a burner phone or just completely resetting your phone. We had cases of activists that were recently traveling that were asked about the Columbia encampments, that their phones were searched. So just keep in mind, especially if you're a student and you have information of others on your phone, that you have even more of a responsibility to secure your phone and make sure that there's no information that's accessible to TSA at that point.
Immigration is uniquely under the constitutional structure within the power of the president to create new laws and to enforce new laws and to pick and choose how he or she wants to enforce those laws. So it's a very uniquely broad executive power that's being tested in ways that we haven't seen it tested before. Just to name a couple, obviously one of the first things that Trump did when he became president was end the birthright citizenship, right? So we all know, and it's a hallmark of the United States, that if you're born here, you become a citizen. There's no questions asked, right? Trump tried to end that, and essentially he was laughed out of, he and his lawyers were laughed out of court at the lower courts. They basically said, one of the judges said to the lawyer, he said, "I don't know how you can stand here in front of me and make this argument that this is legal." And as a lawyer, I would hate to have my client force me to go into court and argue for that position, because it's very clearly unconstitutional. But that case went to the Supreme Court today, or yesterday actually, a couple of days ago, it was heard at the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court really doesn't want to touch the birthright citizenship issue, and the birthright citizenship issue was not really brought up at the Supreme Court. The government really made this case about something a little bit more complicated, which is nationwide injunctions. Normally, the courts can rule that an entire law is illegal and it doesn't apply to anyone in the United States. That's normally how it goes. So basically, if one person brings a lawsuit and says, hey, my baby was born here on the US this day, this law says that my baby's not a US citizen, but that law is illegal. If the court says that's illegal, it doesn't mean it's just illegal to that person. The whole thing is illegal across the entire country. So basically what the Trump administration was arguing in the court was that the judge doesn't have the right to say that this whole law is illegal. The judge can say that the law is illegal to this one baby who was born, but as to all the other babies, they have to bring their own lawsuits. And that's a scary thing to think about if it happens. And some of the judges were actually, these are conservative judges. And these issues always in immigration always turn out to be about the separation of powers between the three branches of government. You have the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch. And so it's a scary thing to think about that every time a baby's born in the US, you have to find a lawyer, pay them, go to court, roll the dice to try to get a judge to order that your baby's a US citizen. So we're watching that very closely, even though it's clearly unconstitutional. The administration has a lot of tricks up their sleeve. They had 4 years to think about this, and then they had 4 years to implement it, then 4 years to think about how they're going to implement it, and now they have 4 more years. And everything that I'm about to tell you in this talk, you should just remember that it's only May. He got elected, he got in on January 20th. Like, it's not even 5 months yet, and we have 155 executive orders. Most of them, I would say the majority of them, are probably about immigration. We have travel bans from different countries. Like last time, the Muslim ban, this time the travel ban covers even more countries, and it's not necessarily limited to people who are coming from other countries into the United States. It also allows for enhanced vetting of people who are in the United States from those countries, right? So it doesn't just anymore say, if you're in that country physically, you can't come to the United States physically. It says if you're in the United States and you're from that country, this still applies to you, which means enhanced vetting, which basically means a much closer, harder security screening if you're from one of those countries. So that is going to cause delays in immigration applications. It's going to cause a hard time, and then coupled with a lot of the other things that I'm about to tell you about, it's going to make it very hard for immigrants from those countries to get benefits, either coming into the United States or if they're in the United States still seeking benefits. So there's another executive order that instructs the immigration offices to look at everybody's social media, right? Not just for Palestine stuff, but looking at it generally, they're screening all social media. There's another executive order that screens specifically for anti-Semitism, a very broad definition of anti-Semitism. Like we heard on the panel earlier, anti-Israel speech or anti-genocide speech can now be construed as anti-Semitism. Student visas in particular are under attack big time because they are pretty low on the totem pole for immigrant status. If you're here as a student or a tourist, it's much, much lower than a green card. It's much, much lower than someone who has an asylum application pending. You're really just barely here. So they see that as a vulnerable population. And in April of this year, the Department of Homeland Security and ICE ran every single international student's name through the criminal database. And they came out with, that was 1.3 million people. They ran everybody's name through the criminal database. They came up with about 6,000 names and they canceled their student visas for no reason, except for these people just had their fingerprints show up in the database, okay? My firm represented 8 of these people in one lawsuit here in Chicago. There's firms across the country that have represented hundreds of these people. You know, one of my clients got on this list because he got a ticket because there was a frame around his license plate. And he was stopped by the police, and the police told him, hey, you can't have this frame around your license plate. He gave him a ticket, he went to court, he did the fingerprinting, paid the ticket, nothing ever happened of it. This guy is studying for a PhD, he has a 4.0 GPA in a very difficult math subject, and overnight his student visa was just taken away. There was one guy in Utah who got a ticket because he was fishing and he caught 1 too many fish than he was supposed to catch. And his student visa got terminated, he got kicked out of school, kicked out of his jobs. So students need to be particularly careful, not just for the speech stuff that we've heard here, but also for very small criminal or traffic infractions that can end you up in a criminal database. They're being very aggressive against students. The Constitution doesn't apply at the airport. They consider it to be the border. So even if you fly into the heart of America in Houston, Texas, or something like that, there's no constitutional right. You don't have the right to a lawyer. You don't have the right, you don't have the same Fourth Amendment right to protect your phone. They can't take your phone. And those kind of considerations are even more when you're an immigrant, right? They can't kick a US citizen out the country. It's also hard to kick a green card holder out of the country. But if you're on a student visa or a tourist visa or a work visa, it's very easy for them to kick you out. It's very easy for them to kick you out. So you need to be careful about, yes, you want to assert your rights. Yes, you want to fight for yourself. You want to be smart. You want to be prepped. You want to clean your phone. But at the same time, you have to understand the position in which you're coming from, especially if you're an immigrant. And I know my immigrants in the room understand this. Right? I'm a US citizen, maybe I don't understand it as much as some of the immigrants in the room. I understand it because I'm an immigration lawyer. But as an immigrant, and those of you who have been immigrants and now are US citizens, you understand that when you're an immigrant, you're coming from a much different position, a much different vulnerability than US citizens. So it's always important to keep that in mind when you're at the airport.
We have a project called Travelers Assistance Project, tapus.org. That's what Jinan referenced. Basically, you can fill a form on that website before you travel if you're concerned, and we have attorneys 24/7 present to assist you upon return should you be put into a certain detention or secondary screening. We're on the lookout for you. We have all the material, etc. tapus.org is the website.
You do not have a constitutional right to remain silent at airports, right? You see this in the movies and courts. You can't say like, I plead the fifth, because you don't have your constitutional rights in the airport, but you do have the choice of whether to answer certain questions or not. So if they're asking you within the scope of your travel, right? What is the reason for your travel? What are you carrying with you? Where are you coming from? That is within the scope of your travel, and we do recommend that you answer and you are cordial, because again, the whole point is this fear mongering that's happening, right? So we recommend you answer, so hopefully you could go on your way. But if the questions get to the point where they are personal to you and you are getting uncomfortable in any way, or personal to your work, to your life, to your family, then we do recommend that you say cordially still, I would love to answer your question once I have my attorney present. I can answer that question at this moment once my attorney is present. So don't think that you have no rights whatsoever in the airport. You can still choose not to answer a question. They can detain you for longer, but at some point, I know there's a lot of fear, they have to let you into this country. You're a US citizen. If you are an immigrant or a visa holder, that is where things get a little bit more complicated, and I will let whoever wants to add into that. But I know there's a lot of fear around that, but if you are getting detained, whether it be 20 minutes, an hour, take a breath. Right? Take a breath. You did nothing wrong. You did nothing wrong. You're literally coming back to your home, your country. Be like, yes, I traveled for this reason, that reason. Love to answer your questions when my attorney is present. And usually they, at some point, will let you go sooner, usually rather than later. If you detain you more than an hour, 2 hours, that's where if you did contact CAIR's helpline, CLEAR, we'll literally call the airport and make sure that you get out within a reasonable time.